let's get into this book.
It's
Uh,
funny that I don't know how this happens sometimes, but sometimes our studies that we pick out and then we put a topic in, but sometimes they just fit perfectly. And I think these two kind of have a common theme.
they do. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way, but you're right. So this book is called Range: Why Generalists Triumph in a Specialized World by David Epstein. So, I mean, you really get a lot from the title there. Yeah,
Yeah.
the book really is about being a generalist over a specialist and making a case for that. And they cover everything from sports professional athletes to doctors to specialists, almost of any kind, how people learn. Um, Being open-minded. There was a lot of things covered in this book overall, but the main premise behind the book is don't worry so much about being a specialist. There are a ton of advantages to being a generalist in your career and life in general. Kind of takeaways being you have more creativity to solve problems, and a lot of people don't actually have that level of specificity. And I'm just going to jump straight into like a few of my takeaways, which were the sports side of it, because I've done a lot of research on this, and I'm not concerned for myself. I'm just always thinking about my kids because I have a lot of friends who are physical therapists, and they've showed me a lot of research that a lot of high level athletes didn't play one sport. Like they didn't. It wasn't like Tom Brady picked up a football at 2 and had played football all the way up till now, and that's the only thing he ever did. And I don't know about Tom Brady specifically. I'm just saying for most professional athletes, a lot of them were very well rounded. They played a lot of other sports to include their main sports, and that helped them injury proof them, it helped them learn more about their bodies, proprioception, all these things they learn by playing other sports. And I've always thought about that because I'm not trying to make my kids be professional athletes, but if your kid is good at something, you just kind of wonder like how far should we go down this path? Should they play other sports or whatever? I'm gonna just kind of let my kids do whatever they want. But they give Tiger Woods versus Roger Federer example, where Tiger Woods was that kid, and that I mean, to be honest, he's probably like the only one I'm truly aware of that started training his sport at the age of 2, basically forced by his dad. Did have some natural talent, and then just practiced his whole life and became the best in the world. But then Roger Federer was different. Roger Federer played a lot of other sports and this, that, and the other, and then eventually came around to tennis a little bit later than most people would, and then also best in the world at his sport. And so it's kind of like, yeah, you don't have to be that. And there are a lot of other stuff. What were some of your takeaways? I'll get into some of the other points, but what were some of your takeaways from the being a generalist over a specialist?
I think the sports example that he gave in the book were kind of the best ones that people can really picture. And to answer about Tom Brady, he was actually a baseball player. He was drafted to be a baseball player before football.
Oh, cool.
So
There you go. I just
yeah,
knew it.
yeah. So yeah, I think the sports examples really get his point across first, which so it's good in the book that that's kind of how he leads with because he compares Tiger and Federer and talks about some other athletes of how being so dynamic in all your sports. And I mean that's just how if you look at a lot of athletes now, I know I pretty much only watch uh, football, and they always talk about how they were a great baseball player, great track player, basketball player, and all these things. And there's even some I think there's he might mention this in the book, but there's some college coaches who will actively recruit multi-sport athletes over an athlete that's just fantastic in another sport. And because you never know when those skills are going to help you on the field. But then the rest of the book, he kind of goes over all of these other examples of those situations. Having a wider base is best for your overall development. And whatever you're going into, there can be a textbook, a guidelines of this is what it's going to be, this is how it's what you need to prepare for. But there's always going to be some crazy stuff that can happen no matter what you're either training for, preparing for, and looking for. And you never know when a curveball is going to come that is out of the realm of what or whether you don't even know what you want to do and you need to change. But if you've only been training for one thing, then you're kind of stuck. And that's one another point that happens in, I think, the book is that from 18 to 20 something, your brain is still adjusting and figuring out what it wants to be, who it wants to be, and what you think you want at 18. 5 years later, even though at 18 you were adamant about it, you're like, well, no, this is actually not at all what I want to do. And I know just personally, I felt a whole lot of that too. That's a lot of times that changes in like the first year of college if you're doing that, and then it changes again, and all of these things. So that's why being well rounded and not pigeonholing yourself into one specific area is good. And that's why in this book kind of goes over that at times ad nauseum. Some of the some of the success stories are really long winded, and the there was also one or two that were, it seemed like a lucky outcome for how they got there. Like they just kept talking about all these things that these people did. And I'm just like, it sounds like they're just going through trial and error of all kinds of things and just waiting for something to stick versus just like, hey, because I'm well rounded, I got good at this. So there was a couple of times while I was thinking that. But overall, that's the general idea, is that the more you're prepared, the more well rounded you are, the better you will be to be able to pivot to something else and possibly even succeed and excel at it.
Yeah. Um, Another takeaway I had later in the book, and this is kind of like a broad stroke from my perspective, I would just say he kind of just talks about learning in general and how like the struggle in learning is a very important thing. Like actually, like struggling with information and trying to find a solution as opposed to getting hints or getting help is helpful. And then also taking long breaks. And then he also talks about active open-mindedness, which are specialists are much less likely to participate in, like entertaining the fact that they could possibly be wrong about a given idea, So, and I think kind of my takeaway from there was how a generalist brain works is they have a lot more input from a lot of different areas. And so I think it makes better output. I think it can make you a lot more creative. And that's kind of one of his points in the book. And I completely agree with that. I mean, I've been in fitness for a long time now, but that's not where I started. I've kind of always been interested in fitness, but then I had to shift gears um, in college and then also in the Air Force to that not being allowed for that be the only thing I learned, right? But I think basic aviation principles that I learned in the Air Force help with me doing what I do now, just in a lot of ways. And so I do think that a culmination of experience can really help you get better. So I do agree. I think this book for me was kind of preaching to the choir, even in our training, right? Like we're concurrent training. We are the definition of generalists. Like none of us are going to be great at any one thing. We're just going to be extremely well rounded and live longer than everyone else. Maybe that'll be the thing that we're best at because of our well-rounded fitness routine. But I'm just all for it. Now I do agree. Getting to the book itself, love the idea. Yes, the whole book is a book of stories and a book of examples, which is okay. But I don't know. Like, I guess I haven't. A lot of books use stories, but I mean, it's just like story after story after story, and at some point, um, you have to like. There's anecdotal and then there's scientific, right? And he does talk about some scientific studies in some regard, but a lot of it is just a story. Even the Tiger versus Federer, that's a great story, but it's still anecdotal. It's two human beings. You know what I mean? Like two out of all these other people we could look at who are the best in the world. And so I don't know. I think if you truly want to be the best in the world, I don't think that you can just be a generalist. I personally think that there has to be some level of specialist if we're talking about actually being the best in the world. And if we're going to the athlete perspective, like, yeah, they can do a lot of other things, but at some point, this was their only thing. And then they put in a lot of freaking time, more than anyone else, getting good at that thing. So I don't think the takeaway should be you can be this generalist who does all sorts of random shit. And then one day you'll just happen to click and be the best at something. I think it's more experiment with a lot of things, get good at learning, maybe being the biggest thing, like figure out how to learn and struggle in learning and learn quickly. And then maybe when you find something that you do love or can get good at quickly, you can become a specialist from your generalist tendencies. But I don't think the takeaway should be, yeah, everyone should be a generalist and that's how you become the best in the world. Because it's probably just not true. Like you have to really focus to be the best at something. But I love the idea. Too many stories is probably my only con. That oftentimes were anecdotal at best, and so overall, I guess we got to get into the rating of the book. How many fractional plates or barbells or kettlebells or
Perfect.
whatever?
I'm going to go 2.5
2.5.
out of 5.
That's
Yeah.
the worst rating you've given a book yet, I think. What was
Only because like
I didn't hear a lot of cons from you. So like what I mean, you slammed fiber fueled way more than this one. So how do we go to 2.5 on this book?
see the difference with fiber fueled and this is that fiber fueled had a bunch of positive and a bunch of negative, and a lot of his negatives were just a bunch of jabs as he goes, but he was always introducing new things. This was just he got on one track and just stayed on that track for the entire way.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this track should be a lot shorter than it is.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing with some of these nonfiction books is you sometimes you can get the idea in the first chapter and then
Yeah.
they just like beat a dead horse for 9 more hours.
Your TED talk's a bit too long.
Yeah. Okay, well I don't know what the rest of the team rated it. Maybe we can update everyone. I'm gonna give it a 3. Maybe pretty much the same reasons. I thought it was a cool idea. I agree with a lot of it. And I kind of disagree a little bit with it too. As you can tell towards the end, I don't think the takeaway should be a generalist, and I just feel like that's misleading if you're trying to be this jack of all trades, master of none for your whole life, and you're like, yeah, I'll be really good at something, but just keep
I think
doing
it's
random.
just starting off. You start broad and then get narrow. I don't
Right.
know if that point was as hammered
Yeah,
into it.
it didn't get, because he would like prove his point in a story that, see, this person did lots of stuff and then they became the best in the world, and it's like we're really skipping over this best in the world part.
Mm-hmm.
Like when did that, like can we go into more detail of what they had to do to get to that point? Because he, like in the, just going back to the Tiger Federer example, he really honed in what Tiger did all the way up to being a professional. But then Federer, he just kind of mentioned how he was really well rounded, and then there wasn't a lot of a story after that. It was like, yeah, he picked up tennis and then he's the best. I mean, I know there's a little bit more than that, but it's like, well, anyway, yeah. So I give it a 3. So I guess we're not really recommending this book. I feel like got to be at least a.
We kind of gave the entire premise.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to hear a lot of stories, I do think if you have kids, it's maybe worth reading. I'll some saving grace here. If you have kids, it's probably worth reading. If you're worried about them needing to find their passion super early and you want to help them broaden their horizons by learning new things, I think as a parent, this might be a valuable book to read. I think that's probably my biggest takeaways or things for my kids, and just guiding them as they become older and learn new things. So yeah, that'll be my silver lining there. To the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete podcast. Thanks for listening.